Hello everyone, welcome back. So this is the render for the fog, and it took 1 minute, and because it's faster because we removed the shading of the cliffs and the reflection. And that's pretty much it for all the passes. I'm gonna show the original scene, and what I wanted to point out or explain is the ship setup. And honestly, there is nothing crazy here. It's just ship animation, and then the shading is also very basic. So I have a material assigned for each group, basically wood, sail, and whatever objects we have, and the shader is all the same, just a diffuse with some reflection and the texture that we got from the model. That's it. Now in the render settings, I'm going to go to the out context, and I want to show two more AUVs that I didn't explain, or we haven't covered. So if I go under AUVs, I have these custom AUVs, one called ST, one called reflection occlusion, and one called occlusion. Actually, ST I'm gonna I'm gonna ignore this because we're gonna have a better method for doing it. So basically, reflection occlusion, it's a custom AV, and inside this tab under the custom we can specify a different shader, and then I have occlusion, should be occlusion, I have an occlusion shader. And the main there is a default occlusion pass that I'm not going to use. I prefer to use my shader, my own shader, and specify that. And then the ocean, is for the masks, basically red, green, and blue, ocean, cliff, and ships. And let's take a look at the RF occlusion. So it's just an ambient occlusion shader, and it's set to reflective, and it has 128. And whenever you have reflective surfaces, if you need occlusion, it needs to be reflective, because the ship is gonna cause environment occlusion, but it's not direct. It's not like working with a flat or opaque surface. It's transparent, so the occlusion needs to be reflective. And then I have another occlusion which is not reflective, and it's set 128. That's pretty much it in terms of passes. And yeah, that's all I have. The render settings here, I'm gonna go through some of them or all of them. So the final settings is 128 to 56. I don't need these, to be honest. It's gonna give me the same result. Motion blur is on. I reduced the frame duration from 1 to 0.5 because I was getting a lot of motion blur in the first frames. Whenever the camera was tilting and it was getting too much motion blur, I didn't want that, so I reduced the amount of the shutter opening. And let's take a look at the main beauty, because that's the most important one. So I reduced the amount of reflection and refraction. It's not going to make a huge difference. We don't need to change this. And then global illumination is set to brute force, and that's it. We have the objects. The two lights are Ars Dome and center, and that's the final settings I used for the triangle scene. And for the other scenes, I only used an environment light, so an HDR. And that's pretty much it. All these things are in comp, and we're going to